but there was kind of that momentum when you realize like my words can help people. It could be for me, it could be for them, it could be for a lot of people, but you put that together and let it out there to make that bit of impact, and then that creates a ripple effect. You make one person's life a little better by putting yourself out there, and then they make someone's life better, and it keeps on going. So I felt like that's really important, and that's why I don't really hold back from putting my words out there, even when it's scary and vulnerable. And
hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Thank you so much for choosing to join me today. I am in the studio and I have a virtual guest that I'm super excited to chat with today and have you meet, Cassandra Lennox. Say hi, Cassandra.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Maria.
So before we get started, I'm just going to share a little bit about Cassie. I've known Cassie now, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years, and I'm excited to speak with her, for her to share about her journey. But I'm going to give you just a short bio about her background. She is an author, marketer, writing coach, and freelancer who is certified, like myself, in NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy. As a creative mind and out-of-the-box thinker, she utilizes her skills as the creative manager of Mind Zero and also helping others get their words out to the world, inspiring and motivating many on their growth journey. She's a mom of 4 who loves cuddles, adventures, and finding the bright side. Perfect for finding the upside as a guest. She believes in the power of laughter and connection and recognizes her overuse of the roller coaster analogy, and yet it's still one of the best that sometimes she holds on too tight, other times her hands are up for the ride, and she believes we're all here for a purpose, encouraging everyone to create their legacy. I love that roller coaster analogy, and truthfully, I've never heard you tell that.
I overuse it all the time because I feel like life is just so much of that up and down, and realizing after so many years that when you go down, then you're propelled back up. It's just been something that I latched onto, and I can't escape it, even if I wanted to.
I love that. I love also not just that, but the gripping on tight sometimes, and sometimes with your hands in the air.
Yep.
That is perfect. So, Cassie, I'm so excited to have you here today. I want to dive into your journey. You're so multifaceted, but I know at the core of what you do, you are a writer. And I want you to tell us a little bit more about how that came to be. How did you become a writer, and what was the journey and the process of starting that for you?
Well, the journey actually started when I was about 6 years old, according to my mom, because I would walk around the house coming up with my own little poems and rhymes about everything daily life. And then I started actually writing it all down when I was 8, and wrote about a little hen and her son, Ben, and how they never gave up. And somehow that became a theme where I would just keep on writing in those little spiral bound notebooks for years and years. And then over time, I started sharing it with friends and in my high school and whatnot, and realizing other people actually relate to what I'm writing. So maybe I should do something with this. And I mean, here we are a few books later, and now I'm putting the words out, and glad I took that first step in the first place.
Fantastic. I love that. Yeah. So you have how many books now? 5?
I have 5 published so far, yes.
And when is the next one coming?
The next one is probably going to be the 3rd book in my Hey World series, because I started with the first book was in my teens and 20s, basically writing all things life that I was going through, part of that roller coaster. And I put it all together and decided to get it, like that I would publish it. And I didn't know what order to put that book in. So I took all the pages and I threw them up in the air, and whatever way that they fell, I'm like, that's how this should be, because that's what life is like. That's like the crazy journey. So I wanted it to be authentic. Published that book. Then years later, I did another one. So to follow up Hey World, I'm Someone Too, came Hey World, I'm Unleashed. So that was a compilation of those next 15 years. So there's going to be Hey World, I'm to be determined, coming out within the next couple more years, because I've been writing a lot and compiling all of that.
Which I guess that's like this later part, this next phase of your life that will. Okay, that's awesome. Well, I mean, I have to say, obviously, stories resonate, right? And telling your story is a way that I think a lot of people then can see themselves in you and see that their issues, struggles are common in terms of that we all go through these ups and downs. It may be different circumstances, but just seeing the progress of going through that, stepping through that, and coming out on the other side is so inspiring. People love to hear that. People love to hear stories, and that resonates with everyone. So I think that's really courageous, first of all, to talk about it and be okay with, you know, kind of bearing that. Was that an issue at first in terms of saying, oh, do I really want to put all this out there? Did you go through that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Several times over, actually. The first time was when I was in 8th grade, and one of my friends just stumbled on one of my notebooks. And
Mm,
when I realized that she was reading it, like I felt like my heart skipped a beat. Oh, like, oh my gosh, really? Other people are reading what I wrote that was at the time just for myself.
personal.
And
Yeah.
then when my first book was published, it was, oh man, this is vulnerable stuff. Am I really doing this? And then when people came back with words of encouragement, and that's exactly what I needed to hear, and thank you for sharing, and oh my gosh, you put everything I'm thinking to words, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's power in this. And
Mhm.
then with the more recent book, it was even more vulnerable, but there was kind of that momentum when you realize, like, my words can help people. It could be for me, it could be for them, it could be for a lot of people, but you put that together and let it out there to make that bit of impact, and then that creates a ripple effect. You make one person's life a little better by putting yourself out there, and then they make someone's life better, and it keeps on going. So I felt like that's really important, and that's why anymore I don't really hold back from putting my words out there, even when it's scary and vulnerable, and it feels ugh,
I mean, that is, like I said, super courageous and brave to do that and really serving a purpose as well. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people might think that even they might want to write, they might want to publish something, but it's like going through that process of, oh, do I want to bear this all to the world? But realizing, and I think, Cassie was on a previous episode that was filmed at the Revive and Thrive event, where it was the women's author panel. And by the way, we'll talk more about that, but she will help coach us. We all contributed a chapter, and she does that in her work with other writers as well. But we all talked about that mindset, or that philosophy of, it's not about me. Right? It's not about me. It's not about you. It's you and your words and your work serving others. And I think that's perfect in terms of how you came to that and what you do. So kudos to you on that. Thank you. I want to talk for a moment about your mission statement, Inspire to Inspire, which is a beautiful mission statement. What sparked this philosophy, and how has it shaped your journey as a writer and creator?
Well, I think it started quite back a while ago when I realized that I wanted to inspire people, and using poetry especially for a long time, because at first it was a lot about just rhyming, and then it was getting words out in poetic form, and then it was doing things in high school and college to inspire people. And it got to a point where it became more about just inspiring, but inspire to inspire, because there's one thing about motivating someone for a moment where you give them that little extra umph or that little encouragement. That's something special, and it's important. However, there is even more to be said about inspiring people for the long haul and
Hmm.
making real change in the world. And that's why I believe so much in that ripple effect, because one person can do a lot, but you do that with many can do even more. But it
Yeah.
takes each of those individual ones. So by inspiring to inspire others, it's a collective of all of us, like, trying to make our mark in the world and do better. So if we're all putting our words out there and taking those little steps, it's going to make such a bigger impact.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And the way that you were describing that, you mention and talk about creating this chain of inspiration, right? This momentum and this ripple and having an impact. What ways, and obviously some of them might be kind of easy to guess, but what ways in terms of creating this larger community support and positivity, what types of impact do you think that has, and what's your intentions?
Well, my intentions are to, as I said, leave a legacy, but in a way that, as I mentioned, creates positive change in the world. I think that so much in life right now, people are having such a hard time with so many things. And that sense of community and empowerment and really being there for each other is more critical than ever.
Yeah.
So, by kind of rallying together, I think we can really do, there's something to be said about that. So, even with small things that I've been doing recently, such as getting together with local women and we do gratitude together. I led
Mhm.
gratitude just recently and just connecting with those women. Doing stuff even with my kids. My
Mhm.
daughter says, I'm going to be a writer to help people just like my mom. It's just
Aw.
really, it's really precious to see the kids like latch on to what I'm doing and try to also help others and whatnot. So it's kind of leading by example, I guess you would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And even in my friends groups, like I try to be that encourager whenever I can and try to keep the glass half full. It doesn't always happen. I'm human
Mhm.
too, perfectly imperfect for sure. But I do try to do that. And then also even with the company that I'm with, Mind Zero, we're a wellness studio that does contrast therapy and I write meditation for them. So pouring into people in
Mhm.
different facets where they're helping others who are helping others. And it's just a way to contribute to that positive change.
Yeah, really depositing all of us collectively depositing all that goodness and having that impact is amazing, and what I also hope to do, building that legacy, but future generations, like changing things, creating change, all of those things. I do really believe in a lot of us who kind of band together and are in my circle of friends, colleagues, and what have you think the same. And if more and more of us can look to that and spread that message, I think there can be a huge impact. You mentioned gratitude, and obviously Mind Zero, the wellness studio that you work with and work for, but talk to me about how gratitude changes your perspective or others. What does that do? And describe that. I'm familiar. I practice that as well. But for others that might be curious, what exactly does that mean? And what does that do for you? And what can that do for others?
Well, I practice gratitude for several reasons. To me personally, it has a lot to do with appreciating the milestones and what you have, because we have this whole vision of this grand journey that we're on, and we're so go 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 to get to that spot, but we
Hmm.
don't really take the time necessarily to appreciate every milestone that gets us there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really where the beauty is, because that's where the growth happens, that's where the connection happens, and there's just so much to be appreciated. So by practicing gratitude, you're recognizing those things, those moments in others, you're recognizing it in yourself, your mindset and your focus is going on what you do have rather than what you lack,
Yeah.
which is also very important because
Yeah.
especially like I said, all the things going on in the world, but there's still so much to be grateful for. And that's something that we're going to stay more high vibe and more on track if we're focusing on that and being grateful.
Agreed. And obviously, I wholeheartedly agree, practice that as well. And I think it's a message that a lot of people kind of don't necessarily understand. But it really, the way I like to put it is like a reality check, like a perspective check.
Mhm.
Yes, it doesn't mean that what you're going through isn't big, isn't difficult, but it's that check, that kind of reality check or perspective check, that instead of focusing on the negative and what you don't have, as you said, shifting that. And I was
Mhm.
just having this conversation with a friend yesterday because obviously some difficult things that she was focused on and stressed by and anxious about. And talk about this all the time, finding the upside. There always is an upside, but you have to look for it. There always is a glass half full, but it's perspective, right? And if you're so focused on, just the things that are lacking and the things that are wrong, you often miss all
Mhm.
of the blessings. I have an expression that it's like people who are focused on what they don't have, it's like they're focused on that one dime, and I'm using a money analogy, but that one dime that they're losing when they have dollars around them. And I only use that money analogy because it's helpful for people to kind of connect to something that's real like that. But truly, you're focused on one small piece, but negating or not seeing all
Mhm.
of the abundance around you, all of the blessings around you. And that's so important because it kind of just clicks you into gear when you're able to do that. There are many people that never do that. that just continue to focus on the negative aspect of the situation, of the day, of the whatever. And it's difficult to shift and gain momentum. So the more that I think we can put this out there and help people understand what it can do for
Mhm.
yourself, we're all human, right? You said
Mhm.
it. I've had that too, where it's like there's days that are more difficult to do that. But it's just the commitment and intention to continue to do that, I think, is so critical and can be so powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you emphasize the importance of collaboration and comparing it to how superheroes team up. How do you help people who feel overwhelmed by the process of putting their thoughts into words? How do you help them? Can you describe that?
Well, especially want to emphasize that it is a process, and
Mm,
not everyone is quote unquote a writer, but really you are, because we all write our own story, don't we, in our
hmm.
day to day lives.
Yeah. Oh,
But
great way to put it.
we all have something to say. We all go through so many different things on our journeys, and some are very unique to some of us, some are very relatable to others. But getting it out there is something that anyone really can do if they just recognize and accept that it is a process and a journey. So, even in my freelancing business, and I do writing coaching, so I help women basically talk out their story, like have a discussion, and it's really fun. Sometimes we'll pinpoint certain things. And I said to one of my clients the other day, you know what you just did, right? And she's like, what did I do? I go, you just wrote a huge section of your book. And she's like, oh my gosh, I did. And her face just lit up. And it's really amazing, because some people can sit there and open up a blank document and start typing. Some write it out, some record it, some need a conversation just to
Mm,
get the words out. And there's these different methods and modalities that people have. And you just got to pinpoint what works for you, because no matter what, you have a story and you technically are a writer of your story. So it's just about getting over that fear and
mhm.
understanding it's a process and taking it step by step and appreciating the milestones and being grateful.
Yeah, yeah, it's all part of it, right?
Yep, it all
So
comes
you kind of alluded to some of the methods, but can you be more specific in terms of some of the methods, some of the tools that you help people through? I love what you said about that example about talking it through with someone, because I do know that, and I can be that way myself. I do know a lot of people who have to talk it through, but then what is the process of then? You got to make sure you're recording conversations. What are some of the tools to make sure that you're capturing those ideas, those stories?
Mhm. I always tell everyone to journal, write down everything and anything that comes to mind, whether it's relatable to your story that you want to tell or not, because it could trigger some kind of exciting idea or just some other aspect that you want to add. So I always tell everyone that I work with, write it all down. And if there's way too much, that's okay. We take that from one document, which is like a brain dump, your whole mind, heart, soul, everything in one, and then we pull what needs to be there and then hold the rest for another project another day. But I think that's really important to get it all out whenever you can, no matter what it is, and then go from there. And then you dial it back, you create an outline, you pinpoint what the most powerful parts of it all are. And realistically, none of it really needs to go to waste,
Right.
because you can use that for something else. And that way your creative mind just keeps on going whenever you're working on it. And then it comes together. When it's meant to come together, it comes together. And I honestly believe that.
So capturing is the key. I know we've talked about and you've shared some of the things that you have used, but that means that you don't necessarily use just one tool to capture. Like some people think, okay, if you're a writer, you're sitting at the computer, you're writing, or you're taking your journals and then putting them into documents. What are the things that you also use to capture ideas that might come to mind? I'm hoping you're going to mention one of the things that you told me recently.
I do a lot of journaling. I use a lot of Post-its. I'm obsessed with Post-its and the color coordinating. I do a lot of that too, with even color coordinated pens. When I have ideas, I'm like, okay, this is something that's for me. This is for my company. And when I jot it down, I immediately know what it's in reference to.
That's brilliant.
And erasable colored pens, they're the best. So you could fix all this stuff. So I do that to stay organized with, and I know pulling all of this for this particular story or post or blog or for this client, it makes it so much easier to keep everything
So
organized.
color coding pens. I love that. Definitely going to use that. Post-its, color coding post-its as well.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
I
What
did.
about the shower post-its, Cassie?
Yes, my shower. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't think of that. That is one of the best because they say that some of your greatest ideas go down the drain. So we got this little sticks onto the wall and it has the pencil that doesn't get messed up in the shower, and then it has the pages and you just jot everything down and it stays there. Granted, my kids like to write "I love mommy" and "Mine Zero is awesome" and draw smiley faces, but yeah, those a lot of good
Shower
ideas
notes.
come in the shower.
I agree. I mean, sometimes that happens to me and I'm like, I got to step out and like voice memo this because I'll never remember it, you know?
Yeah.
But I love that we're expanding on that because I think that was a big mind block for me for many, many years. And I know you've heard this story, but for many years I was like, okay, I want to write, but okay, how do I do it? Like the whole process of it. I just didn't know how to get started. I had at one time, I think I told this on a previous episode for the authors panel, you know, on my calendar, an hour of writing a day. And I would sit down at the computer and I'm like, what am I writing? And that hung me up for a long time. And then I realized that I don't have to know what it's for. I just have to write. I just have to capture what's coming to mind. Just have to capture the ideas. And the whole thing that you just explained with the color coding, wow, that's amazing because then it's like you can capture it and then decide where it goes.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. You helped me tremendously because I'm not one that can capture a lot of my thoughts just by typing them out or writing them out. I can speak them much more easily. So there's so many tools today, and I think you recommend. You're like speak it out in a voice memo, in a app that transcribes. I have one that I use because then you can just transcribe it to text, and then you can file it in a folder, whether that's Google Drive or some other system you use. There's so many methods to capture that. So I think that has helped me tremendously. But more so, this idea of not being tied to, I'm writing this, just write.
Mhm.
Let things come out and capture them.
Yep.
So I love that. I love that. Um, so you've kind of alluded to some of these things, but I want to specifically ask this question. I know when working with others as a writing coach, a lot of people struggle with the brick wall of writing, right? Maybe I just described that. What advice do you give to those who feel blocked or uncertain about how to share their story or where to start?
Well, when it comes to how to get their story out in the first place, sometimes women, especially that I've worked with, will say, I know that I have a story to tell, but I don't know which story. I don't know what I want
Ah,
to say about it. And talking it through helps, but I'm very, very fond of prompts because they can bring about something that you don't expect. And sometimes people think it's silly. Okay, open a book and just pick one. But
mhm.
you never know what is going to come to mind and come to heart when you're writing whatever it is you're writing. It can spark something about something that goes to something else. And then you could write about a couple different things. But when you know that that's the story you want to share, then you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really fun to just explore the different ideas and get the different things out there because you're going to have this feeling. And I like when I'm working with someone in person or on like video chat,
Mhm.
because when they're talking about their stories, about what they might want to write, I notice those physical cues. They'll lift their shoulders or their head will kind of lift and their voice gets a little bit more vigor to it,
Yeah.
and you could tell that there's passion in that story and that, like, even if they're not really realizing at the moment, that's what they want to share. And when I call them out on it, it's a really fun moment because they don't realize that they're doing it and getting that whole excitement until it's brought up, but then they go back and listen to the recording or watch the video and they realize that that's where it's at.
That's awesome. So obviously as a writing coach, that's how you help and your audience is specifically women. Is that right?
For the most part.
For the most part. Okay. So you're not exclusionary, but generally that's who you serve.
Right. Most of my clients have been women. usually in the
So
personal development space.
that's awesome. So, working with them in many different ways, how do you determine, and I'm just curious as you were describing this, what is the best method for that particular client? Does that vary? How do you assess that? Or do you just organically kind of instinctually go, through a process with them and then you just kind of know, your gut tells you what to use with them?
I usually send out a questionnaire asking to get a really good idea before I even work with a client what their goals are, what
Hmm.
their story is so far, what genre they're looking to write in, and just some background about them, just to have an idea of like what we're going to discuss, and then pulling out some different information from them through the questions that I usually ask when we first speak. And sometimes it's really evident, like some women will say, I just want to have my story out there as a business card, basically, because when you have the book, you have that credibility, you have your story out there, and then whether you're leading a team, hosting trainings, speaking at a summit, you have that as like, okay, this is what I do, this is who I am, this is my story. So
Yeah.
that's one way of it. Some will say, I want to get on the bestsellers list, I want to have this in Audible, I want to have this in a book online, and the whole bit. So it's a little bit different the way we go about the whole thing, but it depends on the person, their goals, their message, their story, and what they really want to put into it, time, effort wise, and also even sometimes how much they really have to say. Because some people might say, I want to start a series of books. So it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So tell me, you've published multiple books, right? And helped others do the same. What's the most rewarding aspect for you of seeing someone else's story come to life?
The most rewarding. Oh my gosh, I get like the goosebumps just thinking
Uh-huh.
about that. When someone, especially when they first become an author for the first time, and they realize that they went from being kind of doubtful if they could ever even do it to holding the book in their hands or seeing it up on online for sale and doing their book launch. It's just the best just seeing that come to life for people and playing that little part in it, because that's what life's about, right?
Right.
Celebrating those things and
Yeah.
doing what it takes to get there, and it's just
Well, and it seems like that fits perfectly with the passion that you have of, inspired to inspire, right? And helping others, tell their stories and leave a legacy and really being a part of that. So that's beautiful. Tell me this, how do your personal experiences shape your focus and on both adult personal development and children's fiction? What unique lessons have you learned from working on both of these genres or one specifically?
well, that makes me go back to one story. When I was in elementary school, we sat in what was called the large group instruction room. And I remember telling my friends and teachers that I was going to be an author someday and I was going to write to help people, just like I had told my parents. And then many years later, I was back in that group instruction room of my elementary school, standing there reading my children's books to the children there. And they introduced me saying, she sat right here when she was in kindergarten, first, second grade, because that's who I was speaking to. And she told us all, because some of my friends were teachers then there, and they said she sat here saying she was going to be an author, and now she's here reading to you these inspirational nursery rhymes. And I had 3 grades full of kids all sitting there. I got pictures with them, I gave books for their teachers and gave them all bookmarks and stickers. And it was just a really surreal moment of, if I could go back and talk to little me, I would say, do not ever give up on that dream, because I had no idea if that was actually going
Yeah.
to play out. Like, I knew somehow, I'm like, I'm going to write, I'm going to do something, but I didn't sit there and picture myself standing right there, like looking back at me. And it was just an amazing moment of clarity and being proud, honestly, because
Nah.
sometimes those childhood dreams really do come true, but it takes a heck of a lot of effort and determination and not giving up, because there was plenty of times where I was ready to throw in the towel, but I knew I couldn't.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. What a gift to be able to go back and to that same school or and speak to those same
Mhm.
age children. And right, it's like I often ask the question and on this different people who come on, what would you tell your 5-year-old self, your 6-year-old self, your 7-year-old self, your 20-year-old self? So that's beautiful. Like, don't give up, don't
Mhm.
give up. Just believe in that dream. And that's amazing.
And if I had to tell my younger self one more thing, it would definitely be that your words aren't going to resonate with everyone, and that is okay.
Yes.
Because so many people get hung up on trying to please everyone, and
Mhm.
that's not going to happen. And there's no reason for it to. It does not matter. You don't have to worry about your writing being something that every person is going to latch onto or that it's going to help every person. Focus on helping a few people and then let them help a few people. It's not just that little that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And that's so true. And we talked about that before, you and I think I shared with you, in training sometimes when I'm going in and I'm speaking to a group of people, I know some of the people in that room are not going to like what I have to say.
Mhm.
I know it. I know they're going to tune out. They're going to be like, who the heck does she think she is? Whatever. Like, you cannot focus on that because it's connecting with the people that you are serving and you are going to help, and the people who are meant to find your message and
Mhm.
find peace and inspiration and motivation in
Right.
your message. And that's what you focus on. There's an expression that somebody said to me once when I was like a little down and out because I'm like, man, like, somebody complained about the training or whatever. And she's like, everybody's not going to like the food. I was like, oh, that's good to remember that way, right? Because some people just don't like that kind of food,
Right. Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's
Yep.
great to remember. So, you talk about the urgency of using our limited time here on this planet to make an impact. How do you stay? What is your process or what is your routine to stay motivated and keep creating, especially when challenges arise? I mean, you might have said some of this already, but I really want to dig a little deeper into this for you.
Well, when challenges arise, I remind myself that the overall impact and mission is so much greater than any setbacks along the journey.
Mm,
I think we put so much effort, or I guess you would say, put too much of our heart and our time into the things that are going wrong.
mm,
And if we spend all that time, well, that limited amount of time, honestly, that we have, focusing on all of that, we're going to get to the point where I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have said this. I should have wrote that. And I just don't want it to be that way. So when I feel any urge to write, I kind of stop what I'm doing. I have actually pulled over to the side of the road and grabbed a pen and paper and just started jotting some stuff down, because when inspiration strikes, sometimes it could become so elusive and it just doesn't come back. You might think
yeah,
of the greatest idea and you're like, oh, that's so good, I'm going to remember that later. And then later you're like, oh, darn it. And it's happened so many times.
yep.
So I think the best thing to do is just whenever anything comes to you, get it out there, get it down, then go about your day, and whatever is meant to come from it is going to come from it.
I love so much of what you said. And first off, challenges arise, right? You're perfect the way you stated that for finding the upside, right? Because that's the whole intention of this podcast is to point out, finding opportunity in challenges and being able to shift. And we spoke about that earlier in our conversation of seeing the glass half full instead of half empty. Focus on gratitude, what you have, not what you don't have. And just doing that as a routine and as a operating system through your journey, through your day, through your weeks, and as things happen, I think is absolutely the key. And I would agree. And I also want to comment on that idea, capturing the idea in the moment, the inspiration that comes. I have had so many times where I'm like, that's a great idea. I'm going to remember that. And then I'm like,
Mhm.
what was that good idea I had? I can't remember.
Yep.
So finding those things, the shower notes, the voice memos, notes in our phone, whatever it is, journal, one, like I have this random journal that's just, I open the page wherever I am, I just jot it down. Then I
Mhm.
go back through and then I'm like, okay, that was a great idea. But the color coding thing is brilliant. So I'm absolutely going to add that to my process.
There you go.
So your writing process began over 30 years ago.
Yep.
How has your approach to writing and creativity evolved since the very beginning?
Well, I've definitely learned to think more outside of the box on things
Okay.
and not be so reserved with my writing. As I mentioned, I used to think that everything I wrote had to rhyme at first, and then
Mm.
everything had to be inspiring. And then I was like, well, no, I could write this kind of thing and that kind of thing too. Why not? And my friends and my mom joke and say I'm a Cassie of all genres because sometimes I'll write something that's so different. And it's kind of refreshing to do that because it helps you kind of think a little bit, as I mentioned, outside the box, but get your brain working in a different way and seeing things from different angles, which is actually really fun at times. So I do that a lot more than I used to. And there's diversity in the writing now. It changes the perception of things to write about whatever I want in the moment. Whatever's
That's
going on in
awesome.
my life, I just kind of document it down, whether it has to do with me or not, or if it's something I'm feeling strongly for or against. Just whatever comes out comes out, and I think that's something I didn't allow myself to do when I was younger.
I love that. And I also love what you said about that it doesn't always have to be inspiring, right? Like maybe you're pissed off one day. Maybe it's good to
Yeah.
grab that and
Oh,
and right?
it has been therapeutic with a lot of things the past few years, sometimes just to
Mhm.
get it out that way too. And I'm like, writing, it doesn't always have to be for everyone else. I'll write some of it for myself. And if I share with someone, they're like, oh man, they're like,
Mm.
you went off on a tangent on that one. And it's seriously been, it's like therapy to me, honestly. It's a holistic way of getting the stress out. So, yeah.
And I love also what you said is that thinking out of the box and like pushing yourself to write in different ways and not in this silo
Mhm.
is refreshing and also is more creative because it opens up another door, right? It's another voice. It makes your content, your creative process, not this one note, it expands it. And I think also I've noticed even in just things that I've done, like not fitting in this one lane, so to speak, and getting outside of that, then also creates just like the prompts you were talking about, this other path that started to get created and that you can go
Mhm.
down. So I love that. I love that. So you talk about the harmony of sharing your words with others. How do you see this harmony playing out in your interactions with your readers and clients?
Well, I would have to say that it's something special when they say, I understand where you're coming from and I feel it too. And it's reassuring that the words have so much power because it's not really, I mean, it's the words, but it's not the words. It's the feelings they
Mm,
invoke. It's the
mhm.
change that they make. It's the way that people recognize, hey, I'm not alone in this. And that's really powerful. So when you see, for example, if I'm doing a meditation for people and saying the words, seeing their demeanor change, seeing their smile, talking to them afterwards and seeing their growth from it, it's really powerful. And it's
Yeah,
something that I embrace that so very much because there is that connection that people have with others that sometimes they don't recognize, and this is one of the methods to strengthen those connections and help people like recognize and thrive. So,
I love that. One of the things that I want to share and talk more about is, you know, myself and 23 other women collaborated on this book project and we all wrote a chapter. And Cassie was the one who helped us. And by the way, it's Cassandra. That's your author name, but we all call her Cassie. um, so she helped us. And I have to say, you were so valuable in that process because really the art of just getting someone focused. I mean, I'm going to speak for myself, but I think all of us said the same thing. Getting focused on how to stay aligned with what it was we were sharing. And obviously, the book had a theme. And so it had to be similar because each chapter, although it was our story or our, um, you know, history or whatever that we were sharing,
Mhm.
but it had to align with the overall theme and how to do that. Uh, I have to say that you allowing me to tap into those personal stories, just by you asking the question, was there a time when, like, was pivotal? Because I never would have came up. I never would have pulled that out of my back pocket, right?
Yeah.
As like that story that articulates this point or that connection to what articulates, what it is that you're talking about. So you were so helpful in that. And I think everybody said the same thing. I guess that's was like we got a sample of what it's like to work with you
Yeah.
in the writing process. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. And that was so much fun. And
Yeah.
see how everyone's stories come to life. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I
That
love
was
it.
awesome. So in your work with others in writing, you already mentioned that you have people fill out, a form or a questionnaire so that you know what their goals are. Is it talk to me about how you work with people? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? Is it a package of sessions? Have you ever worked with somebody just to get them started? Or is it always like through the entire book writing process? Talk to me about that and the different flavors, if you will, of how you work with others.
Sure. I usually do a writing consultation just to see where someone's at and what they're looking for and what they need. And either hourly or if we're going to do like a full book, like, okay, let's sit here and brainstorm. Let's launch that book.
Mm,
We could go through the entire process together. And I've done that with a couple women. And then also a lot of what I do is collaboration, short stories, individual books as far as the content and the editing and outlining and basically just getting the words out, because so many women will say, I have this in my mind but I don't know how to turn it into this chapter. And sometimes that's what we need, but to get the whole complete idea of what they're going for, I'd like to have a really good sense of their vision, who they are, what they want to tell. And then we kind of figure out, well, is this like a couple hours worth of work together or is this more than that? And sometimes we'll even edit on screen together and go through the document
mm,
at the same time, because sometimes if I'm not understanding, well, what's the message you want to relay right here, and they start talking, it's okay. Things like that. So it all
mhm.
depends. It all depends on what they want to share, where they're at, and we kind of go from there.
That's great. That's awesome. So I want to dive in a little bit more. By the way, we're going to include Cassie's information in the show notes about her website and all her socials and how to get in touch with her if there's interest in finding out more about her or what she does or utilizing her services. So that will all be in the show notes for you. Um, but one of the things I want you to express a little bit more is talk to us a little more about this ghostwriting thing. What exactly is that, and how does that come to be? And why would somebody choose to go down that road?
Well, it's a ghostwriting, so I can only say so much.
I understand. It's top secret.
No, there's I have especially some of them are children's books where someone wants to get their story out, and it may be something, even if it's not a children's book. I've also done some with regular growth and development books where they don't really want their name or their entire story completely put out there. So as far as the ghostwriting, oftentimes someone wants to write a story, whether it's a children's book. I've done many with the children's books, or even an adult personal development book where they don't feel that they can really write the content, and or they don't want to, or they don't have the time to, or they have
Hmm.
the premise. There's been children's books where it's, this is what I wanted to say and this is what I wanted to do and this is how I wanted to rhyme, can you just do it for me?
Okay.
Sure. So we figure it all out and everything, and I'll come up with the content, and then it's released from anything me, and they can just put it themselves as the author. They own all the rights, and we go along our ways. Although sometimes I've actually had one that wrote, Cassandra, this would not be possible without you for writing this book.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
laughed.
You mean in the like in the dedication or something in the
Yeah,
front cover?
yeah, in the very beginning, special thank you. And I'm like, okay. But that was super sweet. But yeah, a lot of the freelancing is ghostwriting because it's basically
Yeah.
the client has the rights to their work. It's a helping hand, it's guidance along the process, and it's basically just a shadow helping you to bring your light to life.
So it's kind of like AI for writing, if you will. You're like the AI writer.
The human AI writer.
Yes, I understand. I understand. The human
Yes, I
AI. Yes, yes,
exist.
yes.
I'm really here.
I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I get it. That's awesome. So that's interesting because sometimes it's not a matter of like, oh, just go write this for me and I'm going to put my name on it. It's a matter of that they just can't, even with the tools or the coaching that you could provide, it could be a time thing that they don't have it or that they just don't feel like they have the ability to articulate the
Mhm.
content in the way that they want to. So is it always so it's always accredited to the person. Obviously, that's why it's ghostwriter, right?
Correct.
Um, has there ever been, you can say, has there ever been some story that you've been tasked to write as a ghostwriter that you were a little uncomfortable with, or would you just not even take that on because in the consultation you kind of like, this is a topic I really don't want to get into, or this is a topic that I really don't want to even explore? Has that ever happened?
There's been some that have been out of my comfort zone, but I'm all about jumping out of my comfort zone. But
Yeah.
it's to an extent, if it's something that I don't feel I would give them the very best, I'll tell them. I say, that's not really my strength. But if I
Got
think
it.
it's something like, okay, this is going to take a little extra work on my part, I can do this. But if I don't feel like it's in my lane by any means, I'll try to
Hmm.
help them find someone who is.
Has this industry always, ghostwriting always existed? And as a follow-up question, has it grown like tremendously? Like, are there tons and tons and thousands of ghostwriters out there? And how does one even find a ghostwriter? I mean, obviously they can contact you, but like, what is that about? That whole side of writing?
I mean, there's different sites such as Fiverr and Upwork and several others where you can find a ghostwriter. I was doing a lot on Upwork for a while, and now I'm pretty much doing it independently through my website and my contact info. But there was a lot more, I believe, but with the AI coming in, I think people are using that a lot more just because it's easy and
Yeah.
simple and whatnot. But I mean, I don't think that AI is necessarily a bad thing, but I would consider it a brainstorm or a springboard and use it for ideas and content and just different angles of looking at things. I've used it for some things here and there, but it's always a stepping stone, like a
Yes.
starting point. It's
Yeah.
never the final product by any means. So
100%. Yeah. 100%. And obviously, listen, the world of AI, it's pretty new. Obviously, we all use it in various forms. I do for my business, I do for certain things, but it is not, this is an analogy that I give. It's not the homemade cake. It's like a box cake mix. You can use it as a starter, but it's not the end product. And
right.
if you try to use it as the end product, this is my opinion, it's very one note. It's very surface level. There needs to be some human
Yeah.
creativity there. And to be honest, writing is a creative process. That's one of the things in all the talk about AI and what it's going to do. Yeah, sure, it's going to be used and it's going to optimize certain things, but creativity is going to be even more valued because of that. So there has to be like a mesh between those two worlds. It's I don't think it's something that you could take as the final product. I would agree with you. It's kind of like the prompts in the
Mhm.
journals, right? To get you started writing. It's great for brainstorming, a great starting point, jumping off point. But then there has to be more, human connection added to it, human emotion added to it, and realness. Because a lot of times it's very goofy what
Mhm.
it comes up with. It's very, and people say, "Oh, you could train it to sound like you." I don't see that. I think it
Yeah.
still needs some human connection and some human infusion, if you will.
And that
Um,
authenticity needs to be there.
yeah, that's what it is. You're absolutely right. That authenticity. So that's so interesting. So, so can you share a memorable moment from one of the times that you've spoken, a speaking engagement, or maybe something that you wrote or put out there that reinforced your belief in the power of words?
Okay, well, what
Sorry.
comes to mind was a little like faux pas that happened a couple of years ago, and I'm pretty sure you know very well about this one, Maria, because so I was speaking on a stage, and my teleprompter did not do what it was supposed to do.
Mm,
And it was my first time on a stage in front of that many people, and I had what I wanted to say pretty much in my head, but definitely not memorized. And I was so excited, so passionate to get these words out to all the women watching. And I got up there and nothing happened. And I remember feeling like I wanted that stage to just open up and swallow me in at that moment. And it was absolutely terrifying. And I paused for a couple seconds, which it felt like 15 minutes, but I realized
mhm.
after it was a couple seconds. And I just looked around. I'm like, do I do this? Do I get these words out, even though it's not going to be what I thought it was going to be? And I stood there and I did it. And afterwards, it was really empowering because I knew that I was in that fight or flight mode right there. And I almost ran off the stage. And I said, if I do that, I'm letting all of these people down and I'm letting myself down. So in that, like, where it's like that quick flash, like, you can't let everyone down, just do it,
Mhm.
just that. And it, like I said, it was very imperfect, but it was there, and women said that it helped, and it's a very memorable moment for me.
Yeah, I remember that well. But it's interesting how you tell that story, right? If you really focus on the power of words, it's whatever you said, not what you planned to say, right?
Mhm.
And that distinction, it can be powerful and sometimes even more powerful if it's imperfect,
Mhm.
right? So just being able to do that and you having the courage in that moment to make that choice, because there definitely was a choice that you had to make, and you made one that I think you empowered you and empowered so many other people as well. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you one final question about advice. Obviously, you've throughout this episode shared a lot of your advice, a lot of the things that you do, tools, tips, and tricks, and just the whole. Even the what's really resonating with me is the writing is a process, right?
Mhm.
So even if you're going to touch on any of this, if there was one piece of advice that you could give to someone that's hesitant to start writing their story, what would that be?
Take the first step. That's where it is. If you don't take that first step, you're never going to get there.
Yeah.
And I mentioned even earlier today a quote that I said I'm quite partial to, that one foot in front of the other, you're bound to stumble and fall, but that's a million times better than taking no steps at all. And that is a quote by me back in 1996.
Wow.
And it's something that I always think about that, because sometimes when I'm hesitant to take a step, and even though I know it's the direction that I want to go, sometimes that first step really is the hardest one. But that's where you gain momentum. That's where you start getting your words out. That's when you start hitting those milestones to celebrate. So it's really about just taking action for yourself, for others, for the ripple effect it can make. So don't ever think that you're not good enough or that your words and story aren't good enough, because you never know until you take the step and do.
Love that. And overall, just I love this whole the ideal of this collective, right? That you believe in, that I believe in, this of, we're all contributing, right? Just by those small steps, by getting started, by the celebration of those things along the way, the ripple effect, this whole collective to just improve and put things out there that can help people and move people forward, and then becomes that motivation for somebody to then, so on and so on and so on, and have that compounding effect. So I love that. Um, as we close, what's next for you? What's any upcoming projects or goals that you have? Tell us about that.
Well, I've been writing a lot of meditation sessions with the company that I'm working with. So that's really fun to empower people through that. So it's women and men, all ages, that I'm pouring into with that. So that's been really rewarding, and I'm going to continue to do that. And then also, as I mentioned, working on the next book, because it's going to be the most powerful and vulnerable one yet. I can tell you that much.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually we're going to add to the children's book series, but that's probably in the next couple of years. And then I'm planning to do something pretty special to offer online sometime in the next month or two, but details about that will be coming soon.
Okay. Where would that come out? On your website?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So, as I said, we're going to include all of Cassie's information about her website, her socials. I'm assuming that you can follow her. I'm assuming you have some type of newsletter or will, where people can sign up and get information about your upcoming ideas. And if you're in the area where she is, you'll be able to connect with her. See all about Mind Zero as well, and see about that effort. And I love the meditation piece of that, how that's being combined with what you're doing in the wellness studio. That's awesome. Cassie, it's been super exciting to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge, your insights, and your journey. You certainly are one tough chick. So I'm really so happy not only to know you, but to have you here and share with all of our listeners and watchers. So thank you for joining us. And I just appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Appreciate you too.
Thank you. So, everybody, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you for joining me today. I will see you next time on the next episode of Finding the Upside. Bye for now.